I don't know if Shadow of the Colossus is the best game ever made, but if somebody else said they thought it was the best game ever made, I wouldn't argue with them. It's a 21-year-old game this October, and still no other has ever stayed with me like Shadow of the Colossus has. It's a finite game, there's only so many things to find and do in it. And yet with only 16 bosses, and all else, it's still one of the games I've replayed the most in my life. It's got a Rorschach test of a story that you can ascribe your own meaning to. It's got a sense of awe that you can't beat, and world-class music all wrapped up in a single PS2 disc. I've wanted to talk about this game for a long time, but every time I come back to it, I try to find that angle of attack, and I always fail. It's just like Asura's Wrath. I love it, but how do I talk about it? If you aren't familiar, Shadow of the Colossus is a journey through the Forbidden Lands to kill 16 Colossi. And that's it. There are no side quests, no extra objectives, no little collectibles in most versions. These 16 fights are all the game has to most players. So talking about the game is really hard, short of just ranking all the bosses. I had this made ahead of time. So with 16 bosses to rank, we've got to have a criteria to grade them on, which is why I'm grading them on 6 different points. Their designs. Do the Colossi look cool, interesting, intimidating, and unbeatable? Their lead up. What's it like getting to the fight itself? I don't think any Colossi have a bad lead-up, but some definitely have great ones. Their arenas. How's the area you fight them in, and does it add to, or take away from the fight? The fight. Is fighting the Colossi fun? And not to give too much away, but this category kinda trumps the rest, because if it's not fun to fight them, the rest of the stuff kinda falls by the wayside. Inversely, the music. There isn't a bad track in the game, so this category is more to boost up Colossi with exceptional uses of their music, or tracks unique to them. And finally, how much swag do they have? You already know what that means. Swag stands for Secretly We Are Gay. At least that's what the other kids told me whenever I said it. Swag in this case means what cool stunts can you pull off during the fight? Shadow of the Colossus has a unique physics engine that lets you play around with how the Colossi and Wander move to get into situations you have no right being in. Some of these feel like they happened emergently as developers were messing around. Others don't. If the Colossi gives you a way to accelerate the pace of the fight and get a good time attack score, then that's going to be a huge boost in their favor. There is such a thing as too much swag, though, and if these tricks are extremely inconsistent to pull off, or don't give you that much of an advantage over the normal route, it'll cancel itself out. Before we get started, though, the final million-dollar question. What version do I recommend? There are 4 versions of Shadow of the Colossus. The original PlayStation 2 version, the PlayStation 3 remaster as a part of the Team Eco collection, the PlayStation 4 remake by Bluepoint, and emulating the PS2 version. No one version is flawless, and you're gonna have a good time no matter which one you pick, but if you want that authentic experience, go with the PS2 original. Every version that came after the original tried fixing things that are just part of the experience. Realistic sunlight, lush foliage, and a consistent frame rate feel like fixes, but they don't feel like Shadow of the Colossus. Just because those choices were made to mask the limitations of the PlayStation 2, don't mean they weren't also made with intent. The barren fields of the Forbidden Land were made that way to make the place feel hopeless. The harsh sunlight makes moments when you come over a hill and get drowned in light feel like you're always under attack. The Bluepoint remake is on its own a great-looking game, and a good interpretation of the original, but it's not better. I don't even think it's as good. Not to mention playing the game at a higher frame rate messes with how the Colossi act, which I found in the emulated version, and made some bosses way worse to fight. I still ended up playing through the emulated version, 1, because it's Shadow of the Colossus, and 2, because some of the tricks I tried were a lot easier to pull off than it would have been on a PlayStation 2 running through a capture card. So this time, we're playing on original hardware. As opposed to what I normally do, paint every frame of gameplay from memory. Okay, should probably address this one out of the gate. The Colossi don't really have names. Internally, Team Eco referred to them one of two ways. Either numerically or with a general descriptor, like tortoise or minotaur. Somewhere along the way, though, somebody purported to have their real names, and they stuck. So it's not number 1 or Minotaur A, it's Valus. It's not number 2 or Mammoth, it's Quadratus. Thing is, though, these are fake. The Colossi have never and were never referred to using these names. The person who originally posted them said they found them in a PlayStation magazine from Japan, but, surprise, surprise, no magazine like that exists. These names are all fan-made. The reason they stuck, though, is 'cause whoever wrote them pitched a shutout and gave us 16 perfect names. Nowadays, while it is more correct to use either numbers or the code names, you come off as kinda pretentious. Nomad Colossus uses them, and people think he made the game. Back to Valus. He suffers from the curse of being Colossi number 1. He's the tutorial, the demo. Literally the demo, I have the disc. As such, everything about him is basic. His run-up is literally a straight line out of the temple, with a platforming challenge to explain how the game works. His design is incredibly basic, and iterated upon multiple times in the same game. Every boss that comes after him is Valus wearing a new hat. He's a bird, he's a snake. He got lazy with this one, he's a lizard. He got lazy again. His fight is just as basic as the design is, with the game spoon-feeding you the explanations for how its mechanics work. You get a look at the minor sigils that don't have a huge health effect, but allow you to continue the puzzle that is the fight. It gives you these huge, functionless platforms that only exist to give you back stamina while you climb. While other bosses will expect you to do that naturally on the boss's body, Valus takes it easy. The arena is nothing special. Just one big, straight line that Valus walks in and never turns around to fight you. If you're smart, you'll never even know what he looks like from the front until you kill him. With all of this, it might be surprising that Valus still comes out with a pretty good standing, because broken down like this doesn't really give the full story. Valus is basic, yeah, but God, I'd hope he was, because you're asking a lot of the first-time players showing him this thing. Let's take my ultimate envy. Somebody who's playing Shadow of the Colossus blind. They come over the last hill and see this thing lumbering in, and they're gonna be stunned. A boss this big in any other game would have some workaround to make the size manageable. Make it an interactive cutscene, have them be more setting than boss. Valus smacks you with the realization you're gonna have to kill this thing by hand. Valus isn't exciting. He's a stable introduction for new players overwhelmed by the game, and old players coming back who need a refresher before the real game starts. The first time you fight him, you're a clumsy newborn deer stumbling over yourself, whistling and shining the sword because you forgot which button was the grab button. The boss, though, gives you all the chances in the world to figure things out at your own pace. Valus only appears plain because he's getting you ready for what's to come. If you had any other boss as the intro to the game, it would start off on a terrible and confusing note. Valus is the only boss that can be trusted to start the game. For somebody coming back to the fight after their first run-through, you can find plenty of ways to speed him up. I've played this fight so many times and memorized how to jump up his leg with only one stab, I forgot you're actually supposed to stab it twice. If you want maximum swag, though, you can run around to his head after the double stab during the cutscene. Grab his chin and right up to his head to skip the rest of the platforming. It's a super tight trick, though, and, of all the bosses to try and do schmovement on, This is just bullying. Valus's 11th place finish seems like a low position, but the distance from one spot to the next is razor thin. Valus may be the game's intro, but he's also the final warning. Things from here are gonna ramp up fast, and the fight with Quadratus is exactly that. The lead up to the fight isn't much more complicated than Valus's, but it builds up tension in a really cool way. The ride to Quadratus takes you north instead of south, across this massive narrow bridge overlooking a beach. And at the end, you get a clear indication that's where you gotta go. Riding down the cliff face, knowing there's something waiting for you at the bottom lets your mind run wild with what's gonna be down there. When you get to the beach, though, there's nothing. No boss anywhere, and trust me, these guys can't sneak. You drop your guard and wonder where it could be, only for this massive bull to come crashing in through a wall. Compared to Valus getting his steps in for the day, Quadratus hits like a sledgehammer as he towers over the expectations set by Valus. For as big as Valus felt, Quadratus feels that much bigger. Valus, you could at least get a feel for him when he was introduced far away, giving you a visual break to take in his entire frame. Quadratus, meanwhile, completely fills the screen with his size as you start to run away from him and have no idea how big he really is. His design is also instantly striking, with the cracked-off horn as a sign of battle damage and those large eyes you might have missed on Valus. Adding to what I said earlier about Valus being the only boss worthy of being number 1, Quadratus adds in about 4 new elements to his fight you didn't get with Valus. Having to use your horse aggro, bows and arrows, climbing sideways, and Colossi having multiple sigils instead of just one. The game gives you space to figure out you have to shoot under his hooves to down him, and depending on your confidence and speed, this can either come from him rearing back to stomp you, or when he simply takes a step. Once you start climbing him, you get a big reason why I rate this Colossi so highly: the theme that kicks in. Revived Power is a world-class song, and any boss that gets it is lucky to have it. Of all the themes in the game, this is the one I think deserves the most to be the theme of Shadow of the Colossus. It's triumphant, and still has this element of danger that shows just 'cause you got up here, doesn't mean you can't fall back down. Despite only being the second fight, Quadratus already adds in way more ways to interact with him and skip portions of the fight. By shooting out a back leg instead of the front you might try initially, you can mount his tail and skip the sideways climb, going straight to a major sigil. And if you land on a shoulder platform while he shakes, you can time a jump and get straight up to his back. Both of these offer a great way to spice up a boss that, while conceptually feels simple, shows just how well the game handles making these fights feel big. Quadratus often gets overlooked as the second tutorial Colossus, but I think I have a much greater appreciation for him than most. As a spectacle, Quadratus offers a lot, in a way that the others don't quite match. Call me crazy, but he's not just in my top 10, but the honorable mention for the top 5. He's just lucky we're going off his normal design and not the beta one, because for some reason, the back of the box uses this very scary picture of Beta Quadratus, with a mask that looks like a wide open jaw and these mindless wall eyes. I hate this guy! It's really hard when one of the top 2 fights comes in as the third fight. The 13 fights after this have to sit there in the queue. Well, I'm either number 1 or a piece of shit. Gaius really needs no introduction. If you're familiar with the concept of Shadow of the Colossus, you've seen Gaius. He's the most popular Colossus for a reason. When Shadow of the Colossus gets wheeled out for a cameo or reference, you get Gaius. He's a giant knight with a sword grafted to his arm, the other covered in useless rocks, clad in stone armor that makes him appear just human enough to look terrifying. Everything about his presentation is perfect. His arena is terrifying, this disc suspended above a lake that geologically makes no sense. Before the fight even starts, it feels otherworldly. Look at the blown out whites totally engulfing the background when he stands up. When he's fully vertical, you get this sense of helplessness from just how big he is. This is why I can't say any version really beats the PS2. They try to change this, not a good idea. Any attempt at mounting him like you have with the last two isn't gonna work. Unlike Valus or Quadratus, the way forward isn't easy to spot. And while you do try to think of a way to beat him, you gotta do your thinking running. Gaius is the first boss to actively attack Wander. Before this, the last two were either ignoring you or inconvenienced by you. Quadratus's most aggressive attack is the same as when aggro is about to run into a wall. Gaius, meanwhile, is making an effort to squash you like a bug. You'll probably realize the solution involves the disc in the center of the ring pretty quickly, but until you do and find a way to put that plan into action, Gaius feels violent in a way that even amongst the other Colossi is vicious. Speaking of that disc, the song switching from In Awe of the Power to the opened way once the armor gets broken feels like the game telling you, Eureka! The fight once you get to properly scale him is pretty textbook, but the game affords you option after option for how to make the fight more interesting. As far as swag strats go, nothing truly beats the Gaius sword skip. With this, you don't even have to break his armor to fight him. Instead, you simply crouch on the sword, launch yourself into the sky, and land past the breakable gauntlet, or, even better, directly on the head. This trick is so satisfying to pull off that I find it hard to justify going back to the standard method once I relearn it. This makes Gaius one of the most fun bosses for time attack, since just this method opens up the boss to some crazy fast finishes. To put it bluntly, Gaius is a nearly perfect fight. Everything that makes Shadow of the Colossus the game that it is present in this fight, and there's a slim number that come close to matching him, and even less that actually surpass him. If Valus and Quadratus are getting your feet wet, Gaius is taking a dip in concrete shoes. You want to play the rest just to see if anything beats the feeling of fighting Gaius. And there's only one other that can do that. Phaedra, sit down, it's not you! The game couldn't keep up every boss being better than the last, and unfortunately, the breaking point is Colossi number 4, Phaedra. Obviously, unless he was the best fight in the game, he wasn't gonna be better than Gaius, but even then, he falls short of expectations. Phaedra's best aspects are unfortunately skin deep, as in everything but fighting this guy is great. The lead up is whatever, but his arena is striking for how not dead it is. Funny considering this place is surrounded by burial mounds, but the vibrant green grass is a rare sight in the Forbidden Land. The hidden away location of Phaedra's fight makes him feel like an oasis in the middle of this miserable place you found yourself in, and that makes him this place's guardian. Phaedra's design is another highlight of the fight. This decrepit, emaciated skeleton horse that walks around on razor-thin stumps instead of hooves. That, again, makes the method of climbing him impossible to tell at a glance. It's once you figure out how to do it, though, that things get hard. The big letdown with Phaedra is that the fight really can't live up to all the hype all of this sets up. So, mounting a horse doesn't seem impossible, right? You did it on the ride here. But this one's a bit bigger. How do you do it? Well, you have to get Phaedra's attention, run into a burial mound, come out the other side, and grab onto his backside when he's distracted looking for you. This is what was written on the design docs for the fight, so I have no idea where it all went wrong. Instead of simply staying at the mound you lure him to, Phaedra will get distracted by aggro throwing a fit around the arena because a bigger him is trying to kill him, and he'll leave the mound you are at. This happens a lot, and you only find out he moved when you exit the mound to go to try to mount him. Also, while the time to grab on is generous, It's not infinite, so there's a chance if you aren't fast enough, you'll miss your shot the good old-fashioned way and still be up a creek. For most people, this is where the story ends. Phaedra is a pebble in the shoe on your journey in Shadow of the Colossus, and while he doesn't rank very highly, there is a bit more of a direct method. While you can run around the mounds, you can also stay put at the one you lured him to and wait for him to lower his head. This brings the reins on his face down into grabbing range and allows you to skip through the mounds and the back mount. This is the method I go for in the fight, and while it's susceptible to jank, God is it better than the other way. Overall, while I don't hate Phaedra as much as other people do, being beholden to behavior as unpredictable as his means he's the first entrant into the bottom 5 Colossi. He's still fine, like, I'd rate him in the same tier as Valus, but the competition is only getting stiffer. And now for the hardest working man in show business! After Phaedra, expectations might be a little low. The game just proved it isn't batting 1,000, and who's to say that it didn't just peak early? Well, Avion tries as hard as it can to course correct from the second you reach the arena. It doesn't look like the sort of place you could fight what you fought before. This massive moat has a few sunken towers around it, but I mean, is it a fish? Once you cross the threshold, though, Avion comes in. Game, I appreciate your inflated opinion of me, but that's a whole-ass bird. What am I gonna do about it? Avion is unlike anything before him, and just as few after him. An airborne Colossus that, while basic for a bird, makes up for it with spectacle. If there's one thing Avion does right, it's making the fight feel epic. Staring him down, perched up on top of a tower with no means of reaching him, leads you to shoot your shot, and from there... Listen, if this doesn't sell you on the game, you were never getting sold on the game. Get a haircut, get a clue, get lost. Leaping up to grab a hold of Avion as he crashes into you, taking you higher than any other Colossus regardless of height, hearing a despair-filled farewell kicking in, wind rushing past you and threatening to blow you off, this is the moment that sells you the game. Previously, you would have had to fish for a moment this cool, but here the amazement is built into the fight. And if you do go fishing, you're gonna get even better results. There are 3 major skips that I can think of that are plausible to try out on Avion. Jumping from the body to the edge of the tail using the wind current, letting go of one wing while he turns to drop down to the other, and letting go just as he beats his wing to skip the initial climb and land right on a wing. Avion is a boss fight that feels like he was made for time attack more than any other boss. Finding ways to end the fight quickly is a lot of fun, but when you ignore all of that and look at the fight itself, I mean, this is Valus levels of easy. If you break it down into shapes, Avion is just 2 straight lines, with 3 sigils at each of the major points. Even on hard mode, this is an extremely easy and simple fight. I think that's what makes it so alluring to do tricks with Avion, because the boss itself doesn't lend itself to much interest once the hype dies down. Speaking of hype dying down, oh boy, Avion does not retain the wonder if you fall off, which at the stamina level you're at isn't impossible. You might fall off, but you also might not fall off. The second time you jump at him, just not the same as the first. Simplicity isn't bad though, and Avion's fight is still incredible just for the initial rush you get in those first few moments. If this is your first time playing the game and you get to Avion, he's gonna be your favorite boss for a long time. I just can't rank him as highly because the fight tied to that moment, it's just alright. The lead up to fight number 6 is a little off-putting. Not the actual entry into the arena, no, climbing down a wall is a great way to start things, as, for the first time, we're not in a wide open area, but rather a cramped subterranean hall. I'm a really big fan of the setup for this fight. Keeping you in a cramped, enclosed environment that you have no escape from creates tension in a brand new way. But the payoff is recycled. Most obviously, Barba has the internal name Minotaur B. His design is heavily based on Malus and, along with a boss way later in the game, makes up a trio of Minotaurs that have people pining to get back some of the beta colossi that were cut. While the big bushy beard is something to make him distinct, it doesn't help the boss feel like a bit of a lame duck after the most unique boss you've seen yet, and right before the next most unique one. Luckily, the fight beyond is pretty good, with you having to scramble over walls that Barba busts right through. At the end, you bait him into lowering his head so you can grab onto the beard and climb up to get to work. Barba's difficult. Maybe it's his proximity to the more interesting bosses mechanically, but I found myself getting bored with him. He does nothing for me design-wise, since I like both Minotaurs better than him. His fight looks exciting, but really isn't that complex, and I'm left feeling kinda flat about the whole thing. I like how Dorman warns you that he lusts for destruction, but a fool he is not. And then you beat him with Tom and Jerry shenanigans. If I had the paint, I'd have drawn a tunnel on the wall. Barba isn't a boss I actively hate, but if any of them were going to vanish from my mind and convince me there were only 15 bosses in the game, Barba would be the first I forgot. He's this low out of apathy, not hate. Also, I'm sure the person who gave the Colossi their fan names had their reasons, but I prefer to think they named him Barba because it sounds like barber, and his gimmick is having a beard. Hydrus is lucky number 7. Lucky in the sense that I hate this one. I won't mince words on this one. Hydrus is the worst boss in the game. And if every quality I liked about him was a quarter, I couldn't afford a gumball. Okay, well maybe one gumball, because I do like his arena. As a water boss, the fight takes place entirely in the water. Hydrus is swimming around his dark water that's impossible to see through and get a good look at him. The same way the lighting of the Gaius fight made you feel helpless, this makes you realize that you just willingly jumped into a lake with an electric eel and expect to come out the better for it. It's a great dread builder, as you can watch Hydrus swim around, no idea when it will strike or how you'll defend against it. Jumping up and down in the water like a fishing lure to get his attention is a great way to make you feel vulnerable, and having to dodge his electric spines is exciting, but things quickly drop off once the fight really starts. It'll take you a few minutes to realize the fight started though, because this fight is so boring. Avion had the decency to have 2 straight lines make up his design. Hydrus is just 1, and there is so much time spent waiting while you fight him. Hydrus will dip in and out of the water as you ride him, and when you're underwater, all you can do is hold on and wait for him to come back to the surface. If you let go, the rushing current will send you all the way back. And unlike Avion and the other bosses who have similar mechanics, all of the vitals are at the top of the Colossi, so letting go and going back is of no benefit. Once you actually get the chance to move, you'll have to make sure you stay far enough away from the spines to not get shocked, and then give them a stab to shut them off. This almost always involves a second round of going underwater unless your timing is on point. And if you're too close, your health gets shredded to nothing. Once you get to the end, Hydrus will do this obnoxious move where he dives super deep underwater, which drains your stamina even faster than normal and will send you all the way back to the start of the fight, except minus the interest in getting to stab his weak spots. Watching Wander have to slowly float back up to the surface gave me time to remember how much better every other fight in the game is compared to this one. There are ways to get to Hydrus's head without ever even clinging to him the first time, but dear God, it's tight. I've watched people do it and read guides on how to do it, but it looks more like magic to me than something I could replicate. Like I said, Hydrus is my least favorite fight in the game. I think where a fight like Gaius does everything right, Hydrus does almost everything wrong. I'd rather have no fight than a fight with Hydrus. Look on the bright side. It's the only fight I actively don't like, so every other bottom fiver is at worst indifferent. Not gonna lie, been on a bit of a bum run of Colossi so far, with only Avion raising the grade point average of the last 4, but we've spent enough time in the bottom 5. Now it's time to go up to the top 5. Kuromori is next up, and off the bat, the fight feels a lot different. The lead-up has you going underground, and moving through this beautiful lake with more plant life than anywhere else in the Forbidden Lands. And this is just to make sure you don't bring aggro to the fight with you. Further down, and you find yourself in a Colosseum that overlooks a massive drop with Kuromori at the bottom. He's not a very scary-looking Colossi compared to the rest, since... well, he's tiny. Sure, his face is kinda scary, and he's still way bigger than you are, but from up here he doesn't look so tough. Well, you'll think twice once you get his attention and he starts firing off bolts of poison. Not only can the initial impact hurt, but the lingering poison saps your health in no time if you don't move fast. Kuromori makes himself known as the most mobile Colossi by climbing the walls after you to keep firing, and if you don't move fast, it's gonna be a quick loss. Shooting out his legs as he's climbing, though, will send him crashing back down, and in a neat bit of strategy, the higher he is when he falls, the longer he'll stay stunned. So if you camp at the bottom of the arena and take pot shots just as he clings, you'll take him down, but much slower than luring him up for a grand fall. There are some strategies you can use, though, that involve rolling under the grated windows to get clearer shots earlier, and dropping from window to window for a fast descent. I'd go over some other tricks to beat him fast, but it's actually hard to not beat him fast. If you shoot him down near the top and go to stab him, he should be stunned for as long as it will take to kill him. My most recent time for the fight is a hair under 2 minutes, which is a really fast fight for this game. That's only because I've played it so many times, though. I think the Kuromori fight is really one of the game's best. At the start, it'll all be about the fear of a monster who can cling to walls and has the most destructive attack you've seen so far, hunting you down like a predator. Once you've figured out the fight, figuring out the mechanics of how fall damage works and how to get the best time becomes a much greater thrill. The fight also has 3 different themes, including a despair-filled farewell, which never gets used as well as it did in the fight with Avion, but he also has his own theme, Black Blood. Overall, the fight with Kuromori might get a boost from coming after lowlights, but even then I'd call it a highlight regardless of that. Maybe an unpopular choice, but it's not gonna be the last one of those. Hear me out! Basaran is infamously one of the most hated Colossi in the game. If you ask somebody what the worst boss in the game is, they'll usually get to Basaran before any others. The problems with Basaran's fight come from his gimmick. To get to his vital spot on his head, you have to flip him by luring him on top of a geyser. You wait for the geyser to do the only thing it can do, and then shoot out his ankles. Climb, stab, sounds simple. There are a lot of factors, though, that make people loathe the boss, starting with the very first thing he does. Basaran copies Kuromori and has a ranged attack, lightning shots that can blast you off of aggro and deal heavy damage. If anything, seeing aggro limp after getting hit should be more motivation to take him out. What did he do? Luring Basaran on top of a geyser can be tricky, since he'll constantly follow you, and if you have to move too much, the geyser won't hit the main body, which is how you get to flip him. It's hard to keep the camera focused on him, so you won't know if he's on a geyser or about to fire. And all of this comes together to make a boss that people consider a return to form for the bad fights before it. I think everybody else is bad at video games. I never had an issue fighting Basaran. Honest to God, I felt the same way hearing everybody call him the worst that I did about the big fishing sections in Sonic Adventure. Really? This is what's giving everybody trouble? Sorry, but this is one of the easiest fights in the game. Come to think of it, it does sound like a little bit of a skill issue. Not for you, but for me. My skill is simply too high, and I don't know if I'll ever relate to another human ever again. First off, you can hold down a shoulder button to keep the camera on a Colossi no matter what, which means you have full awareness of Basaran's position at all times. And adds a huge cinematic element to the fight where you're always transfixed on this turtle-shaped howitzer trying to blast you to bits. Some of the shots you can get once you have him over a geyser are incredible, and flipping him over is a satisfying moment punctuated by the last time you get to hear revived power. Keeping him on the geyser too was never a challenge. All you gotta do is bait him into his stomp, which eats up all the time between geyser shots, and from there you're free to shoot. Plus, if you fall off after having to go through all that, you're going to automatically flip him over when he gets on top of a geyser. No need to shoot out his legs again. Just with those few adjustments, you go from a fight that can be confusing and hard to manage, and make it a piece of cake. I still got my issues, like how the lead-up and arena are absolutely nothing, but at least the shot of him exiting the cave at the start of the fight is intimidating. While Basaran isn't one of my favorites, and I'm sure I'm gonna get butt blasted for putting him next to Avion, I just never found the challenge everybody else did with him. La-di-da-di-da, off to go kill another Colossi. Oh me, oh my, this one is really far away. Zounds, we're going undergrounds! What a cool arena, but where's the Colossus? That's the average fight with Dirge for ya. Dirge isn't like the other fights, where the Colossi are just moseying around and you pick a fight with them. No, I theorized that Dirge was already pissed off about something before we got there, and we're just the last thing he needs. This is probably the final boss in Aggro's eyes because you fight Dirge on horseback to keep up, or rather, keep away from him, and it's on Aggro to keep you from crashing into walls. Aggro, life isn't all sunshine and lemonade. This is a serial killer and he wants to eat us! Dirge is by far the most aggressive Colossus. There's no calm state or time when Dirge isn't going for the throat. As soon as you step foot on the sand, he's gunning for you. Watching him bob in and out of the sand as he gets closer feels like being stalked by a slasher movie killer. Seeing those massive eyes peering at you until it ducks down for the last time and comes soaring out to try to crush you. If he succeeds. Dirge's legacy is this scary-ass game over screen. Probably the first you'll ever see in the game considering how much he's on the attack and, what are you gonna die to Quadratus? The eyes are the windows to the soul, but they're also the target for my fucking arrows. Shooting his eyes causes him to veer off and crash into a wall, and once he's out of commission, you climb on his back and stab him. Dirge is another very simple fight. Even speedruns of the fight are simply very fast versions of a standard fight. But like Avion, simple is not bad. And just like that fight, the tension and atmosphere are created by the arena, the boss's behavior, and his own theme, A Messenger from Behind, that is just as intense as the fight itself. Dirge ends up as the next member of the top 5. I'd say the only knock against him is how hard it is to learn you have to look back while riding aggro to use the bow and arrow, but learning that under pressure while also escaping Dirge makes the fight even more nerve-wracking than before. And just 'cause I'll never get another chance to complain about it, the game over screens in the remake stink. In the original, they would fade in over Wander's lifeless body, faint and almost illegible. Dirge's stood out so much since his model required huge eyes to make for easy targets. They were almost like hieroglyphs that just happened to look like the Colossi. In the remake, well, that's a model of the character Colossi number 10 from the video game Shadow of the Colossus on the PlayStation 4. They left my man in the dryer for too long. He shrank. Celosia is the first of a pair that usually join Basaran at the bottom of most people's rankings. For having such a great lead-up, falling down into a canyon that means you're truly at the Colossi's mercy, The resulting encounter starts off just deflating. I mean, you've been fighting monsters hundreds of times your own size. The last one was like a million miles long or something. If fighting one only a little bit bigger than aggro, it's a hard sell. Don't worry though, Celosia makes it harder. So the Colossi is completely armored. There's no exposed flesh to climb and no sigil to stab at. And here come some of the problems that just don't explain themselves very elegantly. To get Celosia into murder range, you have to have him run into a brazier that drops a stick. Set the stick on fire, and you can force Celosia off of a cliff with its fear of fire. Alright, so unlike Basaran, I'm not gonna come to this one's defense. I think a lot of the common complaints with this one are correct. I think the fight doesn't really have a coherent train of thought. Not the sort of thing somebody would figure out naturally without Dorman chiming in when the popcorn runs out and he gets sick of watching you ragdoll. This uses a once-in-the-game prompt to pick up an object that replaces a key item, which, having a mechanic exclusive to one boss, is the reason the Spider Colossus was cut from the game. And that would have been a lot more interesting than this one. The cramped nature of the hall and Celosia's aggressive attack pattern make the camera lose its goddamn mind. You can't see where Celosia is, and if you aren't mashing to get back up faster, you can stand up for just long enough to get smacked back down. Forcing him off of the cliff is at least cool, but once he gets knocked down... Man, I want to jump stab him from up here! It should be possible. It feels possible, but the best you're gonna get is the second lower level, and that's pathetic. Also, you better not hope for a fast time on those non-PS2 versions, because that upped frame rate makes the states where you can do a charged stab impossibly small. Might as well do a jump stab at that point, but oh look, you fell off! Good luck getting back on, you jerk! Celosia isn't awful. He's only fourth worst, which is just kind of annoying, but still not a great start to the endgame. Hey! F this guy! I'm not very good at hiding when they're in the bottom 5, am I? Pelagia isn't a boss without merit. No doubt the highlight is his design. Before now, every Colossi looked like something. It didn't have to be one-to-one, but they were at least analogous to an animal or mythological creature. So then what the hell is Pelagia supposed to be? With no visible face, tusks coming out of the side of whatever his neck spat out, teeth on top, weird triple-sectioned legs that it walks around on, and no idea what the rest looks like thanks to being submerged in water, Pelagia is easily the game's weirdest-looking boss. Like Kuromori and Basaran, he has the ability to shoot lightning, so either duck behind rubble or dive under the water to avoid it. Oh, somebody threw a toaster into the bathtub! Better jump in, it's the last place the electricity would look. Your goal from here is to get up onto Pelagia's back by either waiting for him to turn around, very boring, or by just going for it and swimming in a pattern that'll confuse him and let you mount. From there, you have to smack the teeth on the top of his head to steer him towards a platform. Jump to the platform, bait him to stand on it, and finally jump for his weak spot, which is on his stomach. Now, I'm all for a good puzzle boss. We've got quite a few coming up that I like, but Pelagia is a little too close to Celosia in terms of logical leaps. Figuring out all of this might happen naturally, but not in a timely fashion. And actually getting to Pelagia's back is a pain. If he keeps turning, you kinda can't do anything short of just waiting until he stops. I think the big killer for me is that I don't really like bosses that require 2 cycles to complete. I prefer my Colossi one and done. As in, you mount him one time, the music becomes triumphant, you get the last stab in, things get real sad, and you move on. When a boss likely has a second phase, or even requires it like Pelagia does, I really sour on it. The magic of solving the puzzle is not preserved across 2 mountings, and with how slow you swim, that's not helped at all. I was originally ready to put Pelagia even lower when I played hard mode on the original PS2, but trying again on normal made me not hate him as much as Hydrus, but it was close. Very close. Shoutouts to the Brazilian Shadow of the Colossus speedrunning community who perform sorcery on Pelagia to make him one of the most fun speedruns in the game. They're making AMVs out of your corpse, man! Fight back! Alright, we might have hit another cold spell, but if it's any comfort, we've run out of bottom 5 Colossi. And the 4 remaining all rank in the top 8, 2 even making it to the top 5. And as for our first one, I mean, this one's kind of expected at this point. Phalanx is our 3rd place finish. And if you've ever played the game before, you'll only be mad he's not higher. While the other bosses capture the danger and the panic the Colossi create, Phalanx is the opposite. Phalanx is a large sand snake with wings that flies by inflating air sacs. By length, it's the largest Colossus of them all. And as it's flying around in the sky, you'll get a great look at how massive it is. And where any other Colossi would take the chance to drop a nuke or something, Phalanx is content to just soar around the sky. It doesn't regard you. Doesn't engage. The onus for starting the fight is totally on you. Grounding him by shooting his air sacs feels cruel in a way that none of the other Colossi fights felt. It's just minding its own business, and you have to cripple it to get it lower. Once you bring it down, you can jump onto its wing, and the thrill of the Avion fight comes back in full force. Well, similarly, the tactics once you're on Phalanx are simple. The grandeur of the fight itself is carrying it like crazy. Desperately clinging as it barrel rolls in the air, running when you can, and trying to stay still whenever possible is a thrill. And the fight being so simple lets you enjoy it. I place it this high above Avion because it's just that much more of a spectacle. And the arena being plain is fine because a beast this big would need this much space to fly around in. It wouldn't make as much sense if you were confined to just one area. There isn't even really that much of an arena because there isn't even really that much of a fight. It's more of a hunt you enact upon Phalanx that it's just unlucky enough to be the victim of. An undercurrent of Shadow of the Colossus's story is asking if what you're doing is right. You know so little about the world you're in that you occasionally question if what you're doing is worth the goal of reviving Mono, or if it's even a good thing to be doing at all. Phalanx's gentle and aloof nature forces that question onto you, and every Colossi past this forces it onto you in more and more overt ways. For being the start of the real endgame, and for being a fight that sticks with you long after the game ends, Phalanx earned his bronze medal finish. He doesn't have a sword, that's his real problem. The second of the Shrinky Dink sisters, Cenobia doesn't inspire much confidence at a glance. The 2 Colossi noticeably smaller than the rest, and they're clones on top of it. Modding the Phoenix Colossi over top of one of them is sounding real good right about now. Cenobia, though, I think is a brilliant way to tackle a smaller boss. His arena and intro are handled perfectly. The destroyed ruins of a once great kingdom with its vigilant guardian at the top. Cenobia is sitting there, looking out at the horizon, vigilant and immediately on guard. No doubt observing the pillars of light that come from killing a Colossus, and knowing what they mean as he's on the attack from the moment he sees you. Phalanx was representing the majesty you were sullying on your little quest. Cenobia is the revenge. He tries to charge you down the second the fight starts, and just like with Celosia, the way forward isn't clear because there's no exposed weak spot. Unlike Celosia though, Cenobia has a very clear path forward. You get to higher ground to stay out of the way of the rampaging monster, and eventually Cenobia runs into a pillar. It collapses, and you're able to advance forward, and that's the fight. You have to bait Cenobia into opening the path further for you until you can trick him into dropping a platform on his head to break his armor. Rather than testing your guessing skills like Celosia, Cenobia tests something you've been using all game: problem solving and climbing. They can't have you scaling the monster or match the scale of the last fights, so let's have you do something totally different, pitting Wander against a runaway bulldozer and tearing down the surroundings. The smaller Colossi come off feeling like much bigger threats than the bigger Colossi thanks to how much more personal their attacks are. Having a giant monster threaten to stomp you by accident is one thing, but having a creature roughly your own size trying to gore you is terrifying in a totally different way, like being scared of Godzilla versus being scared of a bear. Fight also keeps up the pitiable nature of the later Colossi, with Cenobia being the only one to suffer major damage before dying. His armor is broken, his mask shattered. He looks so beat up, and only now do you start dealing real damage. There are techniques to speed up the fight as well, like stunting off of a charging Cenobia or moving during the cutscenes, but it's still going to be one of the longer fights, and I'm fine with that. I think Cenobia is underrated and gets a bad rap for sharing so much DNA with a worse boss. I think if you can see past the size and look at what makes him such a good fight, you'll appreciate him a lot more. Also, I'm sorry, but the person who made these names had to make these two more distinct. I got tongue-tied this entire time trying to make sure I didn't say one name instead of the other. And now we're down to only 2 Colossi left. Naturally, one of them is going into 7th place, and the other is my favorite fight in the game. So let's not beat around the bush. The best Colossus in the game is... You know, I was kinda banking on the 2 statues being a bit more distinct. Trust me, this is actually really shocking! The 7th place Colossus is the final boss, Malus. The last of the Colossi, bound in a tower, forced to stay in place, watching bit by bit as every one of its fellow Colossi was slaughtered, and their lights mocked him from a distance. He knew this was coming ever since you slayed Valus, and he's not going to let you go easily. The lead up to this fight has a very unfair advantage over the rest, since on the way there, you lose aggro and are forced to go it alone for the very first time. The melancholy that's mounted for the previous fights reaches a freezing point, I guess, as the world feels empty and alone, more than it ever did before. All that's pushing you forward now is you can't go back. Once Malus's form is finally revealed, you're forced to grapple with how you even fight something like this. A massive monster that can smite you with a single blast from a mile away. What follows is less of a fight and more of an obstacle course, running underground to avoid Malus and only popping up for as little time as you have to avoid being blasted. You make it far enough and eventually upskirt the final boss as you have to scale the tower towards Malus's exposed flesh. The only sigil is on his forehead, so you have to stab him in the back, which he tries to hold. So you jump to the hand. You run along his arm, perilously dangling above a drop that'll kill you, stab his shoulder to make him move his other arm, and with no way forward, you fire arrows into his shoulder and finally reach his head. All the while, Malus is distressingly calm. His eyes fade away from the typical Colossi orange to blue, signaling that he's not aggressive. This does so much storytelling without explicitly telling you what it means. It's up to you to decide why Malus looks so calm. You know what he's capable of. He could blast you all the way back to the temple, but he's not. The final stretch is the same way you've taken down every Colossi to this point. Hold on tight, stab when you can, and eventually he'll die. The whole sequence of fighting Malus is great, underscored by an appropriately dread-filled and gloomy theme, Demise of the Ritual. But I said sequence, and not fight. A lot of the fight with Malus is less of a battle and more of a platforming challenge. You spend little time actually dealing real damage to Malus, and while the fight is still great, it feels more like you're doing this course and killing Malus is sort of a byproduct. It's still an exceptional final boss. Any game would kill to have a finale this meaningful. But like I said, the fight matters a lot with these bosses, and Malus isn't the first I'd revisit. In fact, he's the 7th. Argus is the boss between Cenobia and Malus, and to me, is Shadow of the Colossus at its best. The lead up to his fight, perfect. The approach towards this long-destroyed castle raises so many questions about the Forbidden Lands. How long has it been like this? Was the Colossus who lives here now around when there were people? Were the Colossi friendly? Why does nobody live here anymore? As the most man-made and habitable part of the Forbidden Lands, you can't help but wonder about it in a way no other area got you thinking like. The long runway from the gate to the edge of the cliff is this tense walk-up. Something's coming. But from where? And what is it gonna look like? When Argus's big hand comes over the cliff's edge and pulls up this massive beast, you realize you're in for one hell of a fight. Being so far removed from Valus and Barba in the fight order means it's not quite the same as Barba being only 5 fights from Valus, or Cenobia being 4 after Celosia. His design is also the most intentional of all the Colossi, in that he has armor, a mask, and a sword. He's every bit the knight Gaius was. He's also very fast for his size, so you have to think of something fast, cause he's not gonna wait around. The only part of the fight I could see being confusing is the first step. Argus's onto your head. To get up to the higher levels you need to get to, you need Argus to step on a platform that jars it up and lets you climb. And while yes, it is difficult, it also sets the tone for what the rest of the fight is all about. Argus doesn't have the same air of sadness the other Colossi do. In its place is pure aggression, with more weight than Cenobia to back it up. To get anywhere in the fight, you have to bait Argus into attacking you. You're a gnat to him, and the only way forward is to goad him into making a path for you. Framing the fight this way shows Argus as the one being attacked, and Wander as the antagonist. In the literal sense, you're antagonizing Argus to get ahead. Launch arrows at his face to get him to swing at an archway to drop bricks down for you to climb, before finally destroying a bridge to give you a path to jump at his head. The ride will be hard, but Argus will stay still long enough for you to regain enough stamina by resting on his back between stabs. It's just the one symbol on his head, though, so on your final stab, you take— Oh no! He still has health left, but there are no more sigils! That's because he's got one more. There's a sigil on the palm of his hand, and to get it, you have to stab his elbow to get him to drop his sword. Drop down, cling on, and stab one more time to finish him off. Everything about this fight is just perfect. It tells a great story. It uses all the skills you've been taught short of horseback arrow shooting. The boss's design feels unbeatable. There's a great sense of progression, and oh, the music! Argus's personal theme, Gatekeeper of the Ruins, is my favorite song in the game. And it plays for so much of his fight, unlike themes like Blackblood, that only played for a few seconds. Nothing beats Argus for my favorite fight in the game, and nothing encapsulates what makes Shadow of the Colossus so good. Feel free to disagree with me, but you signed a conceptual contract with your eyes a little bit ago that states if you disagree with me, you first have to acknowledge that I am correct. You are acting hysterically, and I am a superior gamer. Delete that comment now, my contract's already been signed!